So I came up with this idea for a panel at Limmud, thinking that looking at the landscape and realizing that our Jewish tradition is really rooted in social justice activism. We have a history that goes into the thousands of years, but in both language and practice. But today, social justice activism is all too often being used as an organizing tool or a byproduct of one's Jewish practice and Jewish identity. And I think we've, in some ways, as interesting as the field is, in some ways, we've taken steps away from the core value of activism, of social justice activism, of making the world a better place. So I called this thinking that, it's time for us to talk about it. Even though there's been great movement, we have so many social justice organizations out there committed to really important causes. And I did a little bit of a survey of Limmud this weekend, and it won't be all of the organizations, just the ones that caught my eye. Of course, the Workman Circle, Fallow Lab, Chazon, AJWS was mentioned, although I'm not sure that they had any presentations, Trua, Hayas. All of these organizations are here, and yet some of the conversations we're having seem to be the same conversations we've been having for many, many years. And now I want to take a step back and say, in preparing for this panel, I went back and I read Label Fine's piece. It's called Smashing Idols. It's a very famous monologue on Jewish social justice, and I really encourage all of you to go online and find it and read it. Again, it's called Smashing Idols by Label Fine. And I read through it to refresh myself on the state of social justice in America a little while ago and today. And what was so striking was he speaks about a landscape that could be today. He talks about a growing number of American Jews who are not connecting with organized affiliations of any sort, who are finding themselves not welcomed, or who are looking for connections that just don't seem to exist to them. And then he talks about the need for the Jewish community to take on real focused social justice. And yet, what he, so you think, when did he write this? He wrote this in 1994. And he sparked a movement in social justice that led to so many of these organizations' growth, and yet we're still talking about that same group of people who are not connecting. The world has taken turns for the worse, I would say, and we haven't yet created a key to working together to engage in widespread activism that's effectively making change. So I just wanted to finish my opening by giving you two quotes from Label. He said, "For a people to stand together, they need to know what they stand for." And then he said, "The survival of the Jews is the survival not of an aggregation of individuals, but a community of intention." Both of those quotes resonated with me and resonated in today's world so deeply that I thought, let's talk about what our intention is, and let's unpack our intention as a collective and as individuals representing different organizations.
Stephen, my next question is for you. You have performed extensive social scientific research in the area of Jews and social justice practice. Can you talk with us about the difference you see between authentic social justice involvement and instrumental social justice? What should we understand about that distinction?
Thank you. I'll try to explain. Jews have a reputation for being more liberal than they actually are. And the reason they have the reputation is that Jews vote exceedingly for the Democratic Party, except if they're Orthodox or foreign-born. But among Jews who are American-born and non-Orthodox, 85–90% of Jews in Democratic elections, the congressional elections, vote Democratic. And since Democrats are more liberal than Republicans, more so today than ever before, Jews have a reputation for being liberal. Turns out when you ask Jews their opinions, they're not so liberal. They're kind of the least liberal Democratic group. Like they don't deserve to be that Democratic. But I'm glad they are. So I'm a liberal Democrat myself. So just hold that, and that there's not what I'm trying to say is that there's not necessarily this authentic Jewish commitment to social justice. If you look at the masses of Jews, as an example, you think about any of the major social justice issues that are kind of running around the city or the country, and like no one says, "Ooh, we're thinking of closing this poverty program, but watch out for Central Synagogue." I mean, like they could really get in your way. Just take a synagogue. My wife happens to be one of the rabbis, but it's I'm not trying to blame Central. I'm just saying there are few organized Jews who get in the way of horrible things that have happened in our society and that are continuing to go on, and so it makes you wonder, well, how are these Jews so liberal? And the one area where there's been, aside from people who really care about social justice and are kind of like real mamish lefties, unfortunately, social justice is not associated with the right. There ought to be a right-wing version of social justice. I couldn't figure out what it would be, but it ought to be there. But it's not what they do. It's a leftish, progressive type of thing. So what's going on? So there is significant philanthropic investment in social justice, but the way back, the real reason for that investment, and it comes from oil well owners and all kinds of other people who have lots of money and are worried that young Jews won't be Jewish anymore, which I share, and their thinking is, in effect, well, if we teach young Jews, that being Jewish is about social justice, and we know that young Jews are socially just, they'll come to associate social justice with being Jewish, and they'll become more Jewish. It's not a bad, it's not a bad strategy, and I'd favor it. The problem is that it deprives social justice organizing from authenticity, and that is the reason we should fight for reproductive rights, or for climate change, or for reducing the income gap, or against Israel's move towards Bennett-provoked apartheid. I believe all that's true. The reason we should do is because all those things are right or wrong. And I think we will undercut. I think we're undercutting the very purpose for which the rich people are giving money to social justice causes by perverting social justice and using it as an instrument for Jewish organizing and education. So if you want to do it right, really liberate and empower and put forward those people who really care about the social justice issues and let them work in their own way, and don't tie their actions to Jewish education, which I'll be very clear, I love. I think Jewish education is wonderful. I think we should have much more of it. But to do it right, let social justice activists be social justice activists.
So I'm not sure whether I think I'm both building on what you both said, and as a scaffolding to what we're talking about. A little disagreement about the notion of like specifying the social justice activists. So I want to talk about sort of the two challenges. What you're saying, why are not more people involved? I want to sort of point out two possible problems and two possible solutions in 3 minutes. I think the first one is a problem of semantics and branding. So I'll give you an example. In my nascent community, Lab Shul, which is only 2 years old, there is this we're just figuring out what kind of programming to do and what will people come for and what will they add to their busy Manhattan schedule. And there is spiritual. We gather for prayers, for our version of worship. There's learning. People come to study. And we've created something called the Soup Circle. And the Soup Circle is our expanded version of Bikur Cholim, of making sure that there are people who are alone, who might be sick, who might be dealing with fertility issues, with age issue, with any types of something where people can come and be there for them. Is that a social justice issue?
I would say so.
Okay, great. So that was a big debate for us because it's not about going out there and being on the forefront of LGBT activity, environmental work, or charity in its classic sense of tzedakah. But we're trying to create a community where we get beyond the binaries of like, this is social justice, this is taking care of the sick, this is davening. One of the problems I'm finding is silos. So the reason why social justice is a loaded and maybe not sexy and difficult term to get people on and engaged with is that it is siloed as that thing we do for Tikkun Olam. Can we rebrand social justice as that thing we do to preserve human dignity in all its facets all the time? To make sure that we and the earth and the ecosystem we're in are living a healthier, balanced, sustainable, sustaining, holy, holy, holy life. And blend the spiritual and the activist and the learning and the thing, and not be in the silos of let the soul, now this foundation is supporting young Jews going to Africa to do social justice, but you can't really talk about God. That's different. Can we find a way to blend it, to get beyond the either-orness in our lives? I think that is one issue, why social justice is suffering. The second, quite frankly, is societal, and that's smugness. Selfish smugness. We're living in a very privileged age. And people are sitting on their... And, I think the age in this room is skewing older. But I think if we're looking at younger... There's such a smorgasbord of things to do about me. Me, 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 me. How do you move from me to we? To understand, and that happens as you grow a little older. I'm now 45 with 3 kids, recently a mourner. I'm understanding the move from me to we, which I maybe did not understand as well in my 30s, certainly not in my 20s. So there's something about the branding problem and silos, and there's a just societal issue of me not thinking about we. So the way I'm thinking about it and trying to formulate this in my work with LabShul, with a work with Workman Circle and one of our projects, which is looking at Shemitah, I'll talk about that later, is trying to first of all blur those boundaries and have Jewish education, spiritual work, societal improvement, labor, all combined in some way. Every time we do Torah, every time we do Tefillah, we bring in causes. We talk about things we can do right now to make the world better in the lives of people sitting in the room or not in the room. Walk the talk. Blur those boundaries. Don't have those different committees. Our soup circle is a circle about all causes. Something about dignity. The second is there is an invitation that I think we are thinking about. How do you get people to move from me to we? To understand responsibility, to understand that we're all breathing the same air, in the case of Limmud, literally, for the last 3 days, and what that means for a global need for that type of affinity, which is beyond the usual suspects. I care for my community. I care for Israel. I care for LGBT. I care for women's rights. No. Is there a way to open it up and to get the me generation to think more we? My mother is a social worker. That's what I inherited from her, that sense of we. But that's not a very popular thing these days. And the branding issue and the silos issues, I think those are challenges, among others. But those are certainly big ones.
Can I just make a quick response? I mean, I certainly, what you said resonated, Amichai. And Stephen, I agree with the core of what you said, but there's one thing I want to add, which is when it comes to education and learning, I think we need to teach social justice activism. Okay, so and that's something I think that is missing at the earliest levels. We have as our society almost an idea that we know what's right and we know how to get there. And maybe inherently, like, I'm going to take a blind guess and say we all agree that poverty should be abolished, right? So I think that's right. It's fair to say. But how do we get there? If you take a group of fifth graders and you take them to a soup kitchen, which I know is a very popular activity, they come home and it resonates with them that there are people in need and they've helped them for a day. But if you ask them how can you help them so that in 10 years they won't be in that kitchen, they won't need that, are they really going to have the answer? And I think that's another area where where as Jews and as people of the world we've failed. So I think I came to the Workman Circle really committed to building an education movement that teaches every generation, because we can't take anyone for granted, from people, retirees could be one of our greatest allies and assets, people who are willing to help lead the way, to the Pitzelas, the 7, the 8-year-olds who so want to work and help, but they need to be taught the tools.
Please.
So it's a very rich conversation. I thank both of you and you as well for having us here. So Amichai, in terms of breaking down the silos, I think our mission, and I appreciate, by the way, that notion. I think the way to get there in this me-we issue is to bridge the me with the we. And as you were talking, I was saying, why do I care so much about the stuff that I care about? Whatever I care about, but I mentioned some of the things. And we're all at a different life stage. I'm almost 65, and I'm now combining this thought of legacy, of what am I going to leave behind, as I'm looking at that part of my life. And I don't know how long it will be. I may have Esrim until 120, but and so from my sense of we is, what am I going to do so that we will be in a better place because of what I did? And then there's this wonderful combining. And I'm thinking of the Rav, the Soloveitchik, had a wonderful article, 1979 Tradition magazine, in which he said that the Hellenists, the rationalists, divided we from I, the collective from the individual. We Jews, we don't do that. For us, our identity is wrapped up with the we, and the we is wrapped up with identity, and we kind of effortlessly flow in and out of the I and the we, and that's a Jewish perspective. And I always remember that, as you see, and that to me that leads to let's call it a pedagogic or practical lesson that draws upon Anne's very correct notion that, you don't mean to abandon the education of social justice, no, chas v'chalila, but we're talking about putting this all together. So I really appreciate your and Anne's comments about and alerting us to these issues. Bill?
Let me follow up on that. Jung talks about the self, the small s and the big S, right? That if you get to the me, I was just at Art Green session, so I'm spiritually infused. But if you are, and Brucha Hashem, as I like to say, if you get to the small s self of conscious awareness of the privilege of being alive and the responsibility that comes with it, you are connected to the capital S self, which some will call God, and maybe at Workman Circle the old socialist will call something else, but let's just focus on life. That's my favorite metaphor for the divine. The mystery of life and the responsibility that comes with it. If you want the me to move to the we, you have to give people a portal into the me, into self-work, which is both psychological, spiritual, intellectual. And that goes back to the human dignity, that we are in the image of the divine, everything is holy, we are holy. Reb Art just said, he quoted two different Hasidic masters who have scintillated three word teachings that I'm going to be a little rude about in just a second. But the first is, I'll translate in my English, everything is holy. His was, all is God. Everyone is holy all the time. Everything is manifest with a sense of holy, thus responsibility. And the second, work on yourself. Work on self. Self-perfection, everything is holy. So I want to tell you a story about that, and I've got two words on this that are scandalous. I'm warning in. You wanted some scandal? Here we go. At Lab Shul, we have a B mitzvah program where we work with B mitzvah teens. Our B is for both bar and bat. We're gender neutral. Everybody is welcome. It so happens that this year we have only boys. Go figure, we're fighting the demographics, that boys aren't engaged. We've got 12 of them, fantastic boys, interfaith families, same-sex families, couple day schools, others, unaffiliated, fascinating, and they're part of something called Justice Club. Justice Club, in addition to their doing one-on-one training to become storytellers and reclaim their Jewish story, they meet once a month to do some of the stuff like Soup Kitchen and some of the stuff like homeless work, and we're hoping Met Council won't close because they've been our partner on this, and it's been awesome. But a month ago on our Sunday, I took them to the Museum of Jewish Heritage downtown it was the week of the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And I had just got back to the States after a month of mourning for my father, who was a Holocaust survivor. I wanted to tell them my father's story. We wanted them to walk through the museum. And we wanted to leave them with a question, now what? What's your response to having a 2-hour immersion with the Holocaust that for some of them, I must say, was a first? 12-year-old boys in Jewish New York City. I distilled it to 2 words, and I instructed them to come up with a one-liner Instagram caption with an image of their choice. That was their homework for the week following our visit. And I talked to them about labor liberates. Arbeit macht frei. And I said, here's how I read labor liberates. I am redeeming that statement from the Nazis, who, by the way, stole it from the socialists in Germany in the 1870s. And I'm reading labor liberates as a son of survivor as what is the work I need to do in the world to fix the world. So never again that talk is walked. They're like, you can't do that. And I said, yes, I can. I'm taking Arbeit macht frei, and I want you to think about it. What is your labor that will liberate the horror we just saw? What's your response? How will you fix the world that this won't happen again? I can't share with you right now the list of one-liners that these kids came up with, but just because we're putting them together, I don't have them in front of me. But I can assure you they were profound about these kids waking up to the we from a me. And it was about the responsibility to make the world better, not just as Jews. And I want to say that in the context of the anti-Semitic wave that we are experiencing, and that's our next conversation with these kids. But it was about thinking of Shoah and Jewish education as a communal responsibility, as a global human responsibility to move from me to we. And I'm glad nobody here had a coronary over my recycling labor liberates. Maybe you did and think, but
The argument's good. The aesthetics is awful, but it's all right.
you know what? But for these kids, it will shock value, and it will shock value that I wanted.
Can I add something to that? Because I have a similar experience that I think, maybe this is an opportunity for us to think and work together moving forward. So we also have these teens, and, we have a number of schools. And, of course, how we can understand the horror of the Holocaust and commemorate it. And then we deal with this challenge, how to move forward. How do you move forward beyond this catastrophic loss? And what our kids have been doing is they've started an annual walk to end genocide. So every year we talk about the Warsaw Ghetto, we honor the heroes of the ghetto, and we honor the victims of the Holocaust. And then what our kids have taken on is a year-long project, which in April they do a mass walk in combination with Jewish World Watch, and they walk to end genocide. And here, as I'm listening to you and I'm hearing your impassioned words, I'm thinking, well, here's an opportunity for us to start bringing some kids together, because I think these walks in New York and in every state should have thousands of kids. That's a wonderful way to both teach activism, to take a real world problem, a problem that's so part of our soul, and move it forward in a productive way. And so I just wanted to put that out there as yet another, as another response to something.
I have a response, which is a question to Stephen and to you, Anna, and maybe to folks of you here. So if you take a bunch of Jewish teens and you teach them about the Holocaust, and then you have them walk for genocide or for gay rights, or maybe talk about oppressed people on the planet, and yes, also about anti-Semitism and poverty, and how human dignity is not preserved and pursued, is that Jewish social justice? Right? Like, the bottom line for most of these teens, their one-liners were not about Israel as the Jewish homeland, as security, as never again, do not oppress us, we're proud Jews. I think it did something to their sense of Jewish continuity, belonging to these people. They have a lot of questions, but their takeaway is about human responsibility to combat cruelty, racism, all those phobias. So this is my question to you, Stephen.
My standards, which I think the whole world should adopt. Obviously, it's not just I mean, my standards for what's Jewish is do Jews do them? So when I was growing up in Brooklyn, I regarded the Democratic Party as the biggest Jewish organization that I came across. They took care of my father's traffic tickets. They were all Jewish. Our Italian assemblyman belonged to 2 synagogues. This is a Jewish organization, Italian Catholic, right? So certainly, if Jews are doing something, it's Jewish. Oh, and then Jews are doing something with a Jewish meaning context, with a Jewish educator, a guy who should be a rabbi and should be teaching in a rabbinical school rather than calling himself a rabbinical student. What's going on with that? But of course it's Jewish. If the Storahtelling takes a bunch of kids out and they go marching for, against genocide of anybody, it's Jewish. What's the problem? And even if they don't make an explicit connection with being Jewish, let's say, which is hard to believe, but let's say, it doesn't matter, because in effect they are associating this whole mission with, this is what I did with Jews. So I'm thinking as a sociologist. I'm also thinking as an ethnic ideologue who believes what the ethnos does is by definition Jewish. So I kind of don't relate to this problem because Jews are doing it, so it's Jewish.
So Stephen, so if you've got this 25-year-old, whatever it is, a Jew is impassioned by social justice, poverty work, Selma is coming up again, that is their Jewish identity. They're out there to fight for a better world. Yeah. And on that march, they're going to meet that fantastic Gentile social activist for whom that is their Protestant way. And they're going to build a beautiful home together based on human values and tikkun olam. I know your views on intermarriage and interfaith. Well, we've had some conversations about it. So
that's not an interfaith marriage, by the way. It's intergroup marriage.
It is possible that
We're not a faith.
No, but
we're a group.
But this kid who is into tikkun olam, tzedek tirdof, social justice, who happened to be a Jew, is now building a beautiful home devoted to democratic values of human equality, blah, 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 with a non-Jewish partner. Is that for you still a Jewish home?
100%.
Like that was Jewish social justice? Okay.
100%.
Okay, good.
And I just want to bring it
we'll
back.
talk about that later.
I just want to bring back, because I think what you're saying again, it resonates with everything we're talking about. And what's critical, I'm not trying to repeat myself, is to be teaching Jewish social justice. And that's something I'm working really hard to do at the Workman Circle, and we're by far not the only one. I know you're doing it. We're creating social justice frameworks. We teach social justice through a social justice curriculum that really teaches the tools to look at problems in the world, to connect them to Jewish values, and very importantly, to create long and short-term plans with goals. So the kids and the adults, because again, we're about intergenerational learning, which I think we all need to be, are not just learning you need to go and march for something or work for something. I mean, a good example there, too, is like Hurricane Sandy was something that really galvanized so many in our community. But this curriculum is of a sort that it directs the people who are leading. Teachers is not even the right word anymore. Facilitators, friends, to look for Jewish values, apply them to the problem, and interweave it in the solution. And of course, when you're looking at how the activism happens, there has to be short-term celebrations. That's something else. When we live in a society, the me society, where everything has to take place in like a 12-hour period, you don't give yourself a lot of time for celebrations of successes because you don't have that many. So we're trying to build tolerance for long-term change, acknowledging that no one wants to say, I'm going to start solving poverty, and I hope in 70 years I've achieved a part of my goal. I mean, that's not a fulfilled life. It's maybe fulfilling, but we're human beings. So we recognize the need for short-term celebrations, and that's Jewish life cycle events. And I know you do it beautifully. And we also have been for many years, for over 100 years, one could say, we've been incorporating our life cycle events and our activism together. And I think that's something we're all charged to do.
And I'd like to jump from an idea that I've actually studied through Amichai, which is this idea of Shemitah. So for those of you who may not know, this is the 7th year of the Jewish cycle that's called Shemitah. And during Shemitah, the land lies fallow during the growing season so that it can restore itself. And I thought that was particularly germane to this idea of the me and the we. That if we are constantly going at it and going at it and going at it and solving problems, when do we find the time and how do we make space for letting ourselves lie fallow and to come back in a way that is more generative than we were before? I would ask anyone who'd like to take the first stab to attempt this in 2 minutes.
I'm sad Nigel Saville is not here. Chazon, as you know, has been on the forefront of thinking about sustainability in the Jewish world. And 2 years ago, Nigel infected me with the Shemitah bug. And together with the Workman Circle, we created at Lab Shul something called Fallow Lab, which is a year of thinking about Shemitah in a new way, because it embodies the Jewish wisdom, a toolbox for resetting our goals and releasing what we've been holding on to. Just like Shabbat once a week is a chance to, in the modern world, unplug and be recharged, Shemitah happens every 7 years. And at its core, it's an invitation to think about debt release. So there's a financial, economic justice element to it. It's about land release, letting the land lay fallow for a year. And as Rabbi Art said, it's about the land of Israel, but think about it as the global earth, a land rest year, resetting the stage. And it's about human rest, letting the workers and the laborers, if not have time off, at least renegotiate what it means to be a laborer. Now, for our ancestors in the Bronze Age of the Bible, Shemitah was very specific for farmers in Israel. We living today are thinking, well, what does that mean? We're not farmers, but we're laborers. We're not on the land of Israel, but we're on land. And what is the one source that is really oppressing us and holding us off from being more connected and more healthy? I thought that's the digital. So just like Shabbat for many has become about unplugging. Forget Shabbos, you go to shul, you don't go to shul, Shabbos elevator, all that. But can you be off your phone and off your computer for 24 hours and just be present in the moment? Sound simple? Not so simple. So Shemitah as a digital, is an opportunity to think the balance between virtual and actual. At the Workman Circle, once a month, we hold a salon about different ways of translating Shemitah to the digital era. And we go back and forth between online, there are people joining us digitally as a webinar and having conversations in person, and people cultivating tools to walk the talk of a better ecosystem, not just during Shemitah, but can we take this for the rest of our lives and think of the next 7 years? I had a great conversation last night with Jacob Weiss from the Yeshiva University Museum. I don't think it's public yet. It will be, but they're going to devote...
Now it is.
Well, no, right. Sorry, Jacob. I hope it's okay. Right. No, but he said they're going to do a major exhibit at the YU Museum on Shemitah as a social improvement tool, an ancient piece of Jewish wisdom for a fractured, complicated, confused world. So I think Shemitah, and yay, Nigel, for bringing it back to our vocabulary, is a wonderful opportunity to do what we said and blur the silos. It's about environmental, human dignity, the digital, spiritual. It's a wonderful opportunity to think outside the box. There's a meta-halachic, almost a post-Zionist element to this, bringing it here, but I think it's very holistic in a very profound way, and it needs this Shemitah year to think about next Shemitah year. So we can all work together towards how this is going to look like 7 years from now on a much bigger global level.
Thank you.
Yay, Shemitah. And thanks for the hospitality.
It's our pleasure.
Come join us.
Yeah.
Lab. I'll tell you more later.
Yeah. So I just want to play off of what you're saying and say that, thank you to Nigel for bringing Shemitah to all of our lexicon. And it really does enforce a Jewish value of caring and respect for others and a way that release, a year where we can step back. And we're really looking hard at the workers behind the agriculture and behind the goods and who are all around us every day, who it turns out so many of them are suffering. Income inequality is something that's on a lot of our, and I think it's tied so closely to everything we're talking about. So we're starting this year, again, following, I think, or working side by side with this idea, unplugging, simplifying. Our society has gotten so caught up in our goods and services and greed that we've forgotten the people who are the vast armies of people who are out there plugging away to fill that greed and the needs and a society we've built here in America where you need a different clothing option for every day of the week, and that's not enough. And we need products that are really, they make you laugh. Some of them when you go into the stores and they tell you what everything does. I mean, one cleaner isn't enough when you can have 7 for every specific surface of your house, and the cost to humans is exceptional. We have over 10 million people in America who are working poor. And the poverty line is $21,000 for a family of 4 and $11,000 for a single person. And 10 million people in America are working poor, and make no mistake, we're in a crisis. So I think we use this year to really reassess our values and our lifestyles, and it really does charge us to make some long-term changes in how we live and live more simply. Turning off, shutting down all of our technology is a great place to start. But then we have to look behind all of the accoutrements of our world and really start actively fighting for the people who have helped us get to this me generation and this surfeit of goods, and start working backwards and making sure that they're taken care of this year, next year, and after.
So I have some disparate, wacky contributions to offer to this wonderful conversation. The first, as you both were talking, I just had this name for a program. I don't know what the program is, but I got a great name. The Workman Circle, of course, grew out of Jews working in the garment center. My father, Alva Shalom, was a fur cleaner. As we're talking, there ought to be some kind of program that's called From Shmatas to Shemitah. And you could do something with that. So take the brand. Yeah. No, but I want that. I don't want the Hadassah to not. She's not coming. All right. So, but as you were asking that question, I wanted to provide a counter voice to what I thought you were asking, which I'm glad they answered first because they gave a much better answer than I would have. And that was, I'm not sure if this is Yetzer Hara or Yetzer Tov, a good urge. As you're talking, I'm thinking about myself and my own life, and I take great pride in the fact that I have worked so hard. I've written so much. Every once in a while, and this is not ego talking, or it is in I think I hope in a nice way. I look at my CV, and someone asks me, "Do you have anything on camps?" I go, "Yeah, I got 4 pieces. You got anything on this? Yeah, I've written on social justice. Yeah, I got that." And I'm looking at that, and I'm going. I get thinking about my parents. They really worked very hard, and they taught me to work very hard. And so, now let's integrate. How do we integrate this value on long hours, hard work? And I admire people who work very hard. I think it's a great thing. You don't work hard, it's okay. But if you work hard, good for you. You enjoy your work. You get a lot done, and you're meshuggah about getting things done. And you spend long hours, and you answer email at all hours of the night. There's something about that I really like, and that's very Jewish. It's a very Jewish way of being in the world. It's not Protestant. It's not the Goyim. We did it first. We worked hard. So how? And I'm not saying we all should do this, but how do we find a place for the Shver Arbeiter, the hard worker, who also is in us and also is a value? And I'm not. It's the first time I ever had this conversation, but there's something that's got to be in this dialectic between Shemitah and Shver Arbeiter.
And Stephen, and then I'm gonna just grab it. What about raising the minimum wage? I mean,
oh yeah, I'm all for that. What are you talking
I mean,
about?
isn't there an easy answer here? Let's pay people a living wage, and it's so. I want to put that out there.
I was taking off on Kate's, which
Oh.
was a very personal glance at this, and I took it personally in a positive way, and so I didn't go to policy. Policy, so of course I agree with you, but on a personal basis, how do we integrate what the tone I just saw, the issue, the idea that I just threw out there, along with what you were saying, which like taking time off to reflect, to recharge, everything else. How do you put those two together? And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that dialectic.
I guess I'm hearing what you're saying, and I just want to overlay a sense of urgency that we, as a people, I think, are a little guilty of talking a little too much and doing a little too little. And I want to share that I myself am feeling an urgency of 50 million people in America below the poverty level, and this 10 million working poor. It hurts me. I mean, I feel like we're living in a world and we're enjoying a world that millions of people just in our country, and you go outside and there's all sorts of other problems. So I totally agree with you that we must talk and do, but I just don't want us to forget one of the reasons I wanted us here is to talk about let's get going because people are suffering today.
Yeah. And I want to say to Stephen, I'm all into being driven and working hard to make. I don't sleep because I got too much going on, and that's not good. So I want to say France passed a law a couple years ago. No emails allowed in a workplace after 6 p.m. and before 7 a.m. Labshul is walking that talk. Emails are not allowed.
No business emails.
No business emails in the evening. There are exceptions. We got a huge thing the next morning, blah, 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 emergencies. But and this is a controversial, was it Storahtelling and out Labshul? No work emails on Shabbat. Now, put it in your draft inbox. Now you can use Boomerang on Google, whatever it is. can we create a culture, and we're trying to get our board and people in the community to say, we don't communicate on Shabbat. And as a matter of fact, we try not to communicate on Sundays too. Let's honor the driven, and it's the same like Shabbat and Shemitah. Work your ass off 6 years, but take the 7th year to reflect on where there is inequality, where people are working way, way, way overtime and not being respected for it, and not being paid for it. Right? Where's overtime, for God's sakes, in people's respect financially and time-wise? So can we use the Jewish principles of pay somebody when the sun sets and honor everybody in the human dignity that they are? Work your tushy off, but know when to stop. So not having Shabbat in our lives, not having Shemitah in our lives, has created a corporate greed culture, certainly in New York, work till you drop, all in our little things, answering emails all hours of the night. It's just not healthy. It's going to kill us. And then what world are we going to fix? We're not going to be there to do it. So I think we need to take that driven thing with a grain of salt.
In your opinion, and we'll go down the line, within the Jewish community today, what do you think is the most unrecognized or underserved social justice issue? Stephen, you want them all at once? All righty.
I don't know.
What,
I'll tell you what I want.
what would success look like if we addressed this social injustice effectively? And finally, what obstacles are standing in our way of our success?
That's easy.
I'm so pleased.
No, I'm glad you asked all three. 'Cause
Good.
It's easier to do one.
All right, Stephen, would you like to begin?
Yeah. The biggest social problem is, and Anne's been speaking about it, is the economic inequity, economic gap between the very wealthy and the very poor. Semicolon. We have a million Jews, over a million Jews who are living in poverty right now, and right. Two, what would happen is to really elevate the social safety net, like all the things Obama would like to do, and the things he hasn't told us that he'd like to do because it doesn't make any sense because it's not going to get passed by the Republicans. That's what we should do. And what's the biggest obstacle in the Jewish community? Wealthy Jews who are insensitive to these issues and are greedy.
So Stephen and I agree on what the issue is. I think if I were to come in a perfect world next year, I come back and I report to you that we don't have 50 million people living below poverty. I mean, wouldn't that be striking and amazing? And I think our society is the obstacle, a society of greed and who don't really understand how to affect change. So I think we need to train and educate change makers. We need to teach them values, and then we need to unleash them on the world to make those changes. And we have to create a society that that prizes the work of change makers above and beyond the work of business makers. So that's where I think we stand.
If I think about the one thing that unites domestic abuse, slavery, elder care, poverty, ecological issues, I'm thinking about human isolation. People are alone. There's a sense of loneliness and isolation and not enough care in a societal, I wouldn't say socialist, but in a way of real community care for each other. That will be the lesser served, the alone. I think what success looks like is more communities of care, small pods, especially in the urban, that learn how to take care of each other in healthy and holy ways. And I think what's in our way is spiritual laziness. I think we're simply not doing our work. That goes back to the point I said before. Do your work. There's self-work, there's capital S work, and that will get us there. And we're stuck on our little screens as opposed to do the work.
So the question is, what do we do? If we agree income inequality is a leading problem in the United States, the world, how do we respond? Is Is it that we need to be more generous? Or, how do we respond to this problem in a meaningful way? I think generosity is wonderful, and I think leaving hefty tips is certainly to be commended, but I think we have to recognize hefty tips are not going to make even the smallest dent, and that's what you're saying. So we have to do that, and we have to work together. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say to everyone here. It won't work unless we all stand up and start working for change. This year, the Workman Circle's joining the fight for 15. That's a fight for a $15 minimum wage across the country. And to give you a sense, the federal minimum wage, I think, is $7.25. Can you imagine earning $7.25 an hour and feeding yourself, much less?
I'm working a nonprofit. Hello.
Yeah, I'm still guessing. $7.25. Okay, so it's simple. Even go on your computer and look for the Fight for 15, or I'm inviting you. Come to the Workman Circle website. We're joining the Fight for 15, which is a nationwide movement. You're not just joining. We're one entryway. We are committed to, as I've said, to teaching and doing. And what we've learned is, it's not enough to just do either, right? So we're teaching social justice, and we're committed to a Fight for 15 and other activist endeavors. But if you're particularly interested in income inequality, we're pledging the next year to focus on it and thereafter. And we'd love to take anybody who wants to on the journey with us. We will give you opportunities to participate from your home and there. We think there's opportunities for everyone to make calls, to write to their legislators, to visit. I mean, the wonderful thing about activism is it's not really about you marching in the streets. It happens to be, I think, a wonderful community moment when you come together and you march, and I encourage people who are up for that. But it's just as important, the day-by-day calls, and technology has allowed us so that nowadays we can send you 4 people to call and just talk. Talk about an issue that's really, and you get talking points. So you have you can find the tools, and we are more than happy to help you find the tools to affect real-time change.
So just to talk about those wealthy people who should be doing something. I wasn't really talking about tips and all that stuff and being nice. I was talking about supporting legislation and the political parties that want to tax the rich and give money to the poor. I mean, the rest is commentary. It's affordable care, it's estate taxes, it's low income taxes, massive deductions. There's a whole progressive economic agenda that our wealthy people do not support. Michael Bloomberg and Lloyd Blankfein are not behind the efforts to raise taxes on the wealthy, and they should be. They're wealthy, and Michael Steinhardt and Lynn Schusterman, they ought to be behind efforts to raise taxes on wealthy people. By the way, including myself, I'm not wealthy, but I earn a high income. Given my survey, I can't believe it. I earn a high income. I with everybody else, I'd like people like me to pay more and to fund children's health care and affordable health care and affordable housing and food stamps and all these things, and the working tax credits. There's a massive progressive agenda. It ought to be supported by rich Jews. They don't support it. We need to provoke them, shame them, embarrass them, and convince them to be behind those efforts. And the other group, it mystifies me. It doesn't actually, but it mystifies me that the Haredi groups and Orthodox groups, which so much depend upon all these programs to survive, all vote Republican. Now, I happen to understand why, but it's called false consciousness. It's a Marxist term, but they are voting at least against their class interests, and we ought to argue with them and say, Shmendrik, look what you're doing. You want food stamps? You want housing? You want you want social workers? You want care? You want all these things? You want backdoor policies to support your yeshivas? What the hell are you doing supporting Republicans? It makes no sense in the world. So we should raise that issue. So, I don't have that much time, but like I got you guys, you give to Borough Park, go to Borough Park and tell them, talk to them, right? Stop. You know what you should do? Hit unsubscribe. Unsubscribe will stop the emails. But then go out and then support my agenda.
And there's one other place you can look at. Start looking at your daily life. Don't go to Walmart. I mean, understand that Walmart abuses its employees, and it buys goods that are made by people who are virtually enslaved. So stop. If your sweater is only costing $15, I'm going to tell you it's not made in a fair, safe environment. And let's all start incorporating that. And here's one more that drives me crazy. If your burger is $1, the person serving it to you isn't making a living wage. Just know that. And it's probably trade. What he said. But we're going to have to become a society with a tolerance for higher prices, because the rock bottom prices represent enslavement and environments that you don't want to work in, and you don't want your brothers or sisters or children to work in.
Yes, and yes. I think there's an interesting why the philanthropic Jewish world and maybe even the Haredim don't think about the bigger issue, because the we stops here. It stops at a Jewish we or my Jewish we, and it doesn't think global, certainly federal we. So there's an issue there that we can talk about education. One tip that I got from a good friend of mine a few years ago, it's small, it's tiny, but she asked me, how often do you interact with poor people, other than people on the street? And she said, cab drivers. I used to give 20% when you hit that thing. She said, do 25% or more, because it's a chance for you to actually interact with someone whose chances are it's working a long shift for maybe minimum wage. And the whole Uber thing threw the whole taxi drivers in Manhattan thing into a dizzy. So but really made me think, it's a tiny way for me to make a difference anytime I'm in a restaurant or in a cafe or in a taxi. But that's little, but real scaffolding.
I'm sorry that we have come to the end of our time. I know. We thank all of you so much for coming and participating today. To our panel, to Limmud, New York, we hope that you have learned something you'll bring back in your heart and your head into your communities. If you have questions, the panelists may be here for a few minutes, 10 minutes, if you'd like to come up and speak with them directly. Thank you again. Have safe travels home.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.